But let's talk about this one.
Let's talk about this one. Now, this one is also a Batman story on some level.
But it's also kind of a Gordon story.
Yeah, and when we say Gordon, we mean Commissioner Gordon and
Commissioner Jim and Barbara Gordon. The story starts out, just if you see the first page, it starts out with Jim adopting Barbara and Barbara arriving in Gotham on train.
It's interesting because, I think that, what they're doing here is they have Jim adopting Barbara, who is his wife Barbara's daughter, I believe. It's not something that they make entirely clear. We could probably look into this and see the exact background there. But
anyway,
overall.
So, aside from Batman's side of the story, which I guess you'll talk about, since I just kind of steamrolled you with this one, Jim has to adjust his life and just how he acts around Barbara. Because he's a commissioner, he's used to kind of acting with a lot of authority and a lot of assertion and just telling people what to do. And with Barbara, he has to learn how to be more of a father figure. And you can see this in the comic that he's adjusting when he's talking to his baby son or daughter, whatever, his baby. You see the mother handling him, and Barbara's like, well, that's, like, you're just telling him to grow up and not being a baby anymore. So, pushing your son, there he goes.
If we're looking at the scene that I think really shows this conflict, what's fantastic is that we have this argument between Jim and Barbara at the dinner table, and the best part is that as it's a 12-panel page, which you don't see very often, and as it continues, it just goes more into that light and shadow contrast until we're just in black and white as the argument escalates. It's that type of storytelling that I think gets across really well in this book. So yeah, eventually, Barbara gets a little bit fed up with the way that Jim has been treating her. Meanwhile, Batman is going around chasing the Mad Hatter, who is a little bit more organized than Scarecrow.
Yeah.
He has been going around
kidnapping children.
Around Halloween time, kidnapping children.
Children who've run away.
Mostly children who've run away.
Yeah.
Yes. Kidnapping them and drugging them and keeping them, and that's pretty much it. We're not sure entirely what he gets out of it, but he's also completely insane.
Yes.
What I like with the lettering for Mad Hatter is that they actually, when he talks, have him speak in alternating capital and lowercase letters. So it makes him seem especially unhinged, which is kind of hard to do. It's kind of hard to get voice out when you're writing dialogue in a comic, but I think that's a little detail that works very well. So,
with Batman chasing the Mad Hatter, Batman says that Mad Hatter reminds him of something he'd rather not be reminded of. He said he reminds me of her. Yeah, and
I don't want to remember her.
And
I don't want him to remind me of her.
And we're shown that the night of his parents' death, Bruce's mother, Martha's the name, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Martha decides to read Bruce through the looking glass, and that's the last thing.
It's Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, and that's the last thing that they did together before, his parents were murdered.
Yeah.
So he kind of doesn't like Mad Hatter because it reminds him of his mom and that night and
all of those things.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think that very often there's a tendency to, Batman is facing this enemy. Well, on the night that Batman's parents were murdered, X happened. He's fighting the Mad Hatter. Oh, on the night his parents were murdered, his father was wearing a hat. But I think this actually ties in very well because it's not about the conflict between Batman and the Mad Hatter. It's not, I hate the Mad Hatter because my parents never finished reading Alice in Wonderland.
It's a conflict between him and his memories of his mother.
It's essentially just, we get a couple of very nice flashbacks to that night, which we see very often, but I think it's treated in a very sort of tender,
and that we don't
way
really
here.
See the murder. We see what happened before they left for the theater.
And after. And I think that, especially just probably almost the best panel in this entire thing, just happy Bruce. Happy, smiling, kitty child Bruce Wayne, because that is something that we never, ever see. No. We've seen derp-face Bruce We've seen
crying, sad Bruce. We've seen tough, angry Bruce.
We've seen ravenous, eating Bruce, where he's just got his teeth gritted and you're sure he's about to eat something. But happy, cheerful little boy Bruce is something that I don't think we ever see, and he's just so adorable, isn't he? And then contrast with Batman.
Yeah.
Overall, I wouldn't say that that's something that drives the conflict of the story, but it's really what's guiding Batman through all of this. It's him. What is he? What is his internal conflict in here? Because we are taking little trips through little parts of his past. What's the connecting theme there?
I guess it's how he chooses to remember things that happened, and we're shown as he gets taken in by Dr. Thompson.
Dr. Tompkins.
Dr.
Leslie Tompkins.
Yeah, Dr. Tompkins, who helped him after his parents died, was a therapist, doctor, whatever. That we're told that Bruce is used to kind of not trying to remember the night of his parents' deaths and trying to not forget it, but keep it in the back of his head and keep it more as a motivation than actually trying to
vengeful spirit.
Yeah, than actually trying to kind of
embrace it.
Embrace it. I don't want to say
accept it.
I don't want to say accept it. I didn't want to say get over it because that seemed incredibly
That
harsh.
sounds very rude.
Yeah.
But
instead of trying to accept it and move on, how he's just trying to kind of keep it in that frame of in those 3 seconds of what happened and use that as motivation for Batman.
Yeah. So overall, a lot more of the story does focus on him trying to save these children from the Mad Hatter. We have wonderful things like the bat symbol in the coffee cup, the teacup, and then the sugar goes in and it becomes the face of the Mad Hatter with his eyes reflecting. It's very surreal almost, but I think especially when you're dealing with the Mad Hatter, you need that sort of surreal element.
But we also do have a lot of Gordon in it.
Definitely. I mean, it's very much on Barbara Gordon and Jim Gordon. I think that they are also major players in the story. In fact, I would say that it's Gordon, Jim Gordon, who ends up probably doing the most in the story, or who ends up taking the most meaningful action toward the end of the story. Well, there are 2 meaningful actions, but
well, while Batman is kind of having this emotional struggle, Jim Gordon is having a very physical struggle with him trying to. Barbara has been captured by Mad Hatter.
Yeah,
so
I don't think we're giving too much away by saying that.
So Jim has this very physical struggle of trying to retrieve his child,
and also
it is this very mature threat of someone losing their child.
Yeah, and also the whole thing is that also she runs away because of this conflict that they have. It's like the question is, can he? He has probably been at fault here, and he needs to, in addition to finding her physically, he needs to reach out to her in a more emotional way.
So she feels like she's being rescued.
If he can get her back.
Just taken.
Well, I don't think he needs to reach out to her as he's rescuing her, but I just think that in the long run he needs to build a better relationship with her, and that's something that's his struggle throughout this book. Ultimately, again, I keep pointing out little bits of art here. It's very consistent from issue to issue. So I think that's most of what we could say about that. It, as I said, is only 2 parts long as opposed to the first, which is 3. And the last is... there is just one thing that I do have to comment on that is probably kind of weird. I do not want to show this entire panel, but I do want to get this little bit here. Do you mind if I do this, Noah?
Not at all. I know what you're showing.
Let's lower this.
Yeah.
Let's lower this.
That's Barbara Gordon.
That is Barbara Gordon, looking like a jinx. I do not know what that is supposed to be. It is the one kind of weird image that every comic book seems to have in it somewhere.
At least it's not a derpy rape face.
Yeah.